Hey, what up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you. Sitting here watching my first of a few docs. It's sitting here. It's a little bit later than I thought it was going to be. I might not be able to watch all three. Basically, I sat down tonight. My plan was to watch the Monday Night War documentary on The Rock. That was tonight, followed by the WWE rivalry, Stone Cold versus Austin versus McMahon, Volume 2, and then follow that up with the 30 for 30, Brother in Exile. I honestly don't think I'm going to be able to get through all three. I'm gonna knock out the first two and see where we go from there. Basically, I'm downloading, I don't know what the heck it is. Something from my Mac, some sort of an update called Yosemite or something right now. So I have the most weirdest setup right now. I'm using my computer as just some sort of a paperweight on my desk here. I have my iPad sitting here for notes, and I have my phone sitting over here recording. I was sitting here. I was eating this epic burrito that my wife brought home for me. I always greeted her with a huge smile from that. I had ate a bowl of Lucky Charms before that, and I was still a little bit hungry, so the burrito came. So some chorizo and eggs, some potatoes. You can't go wrong with that, and some hot sauce. That's gonna make any night a good night. Basically, with the documentary tonight on The Rock, I can't remember what the title was, but it was all about Monday Night War in the doc. And honestly, I thought the NWO one was bad because of how many DVDs have been released on the NWO. Honestly, I thought the Rock one was the worst one they've done by far. I'm not saying that there was a lot of not a lot of great Rock moments that were in there. I'm just saying that this was basically a 1-hour clip segment of the epic journey of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson that came out. This came out in 2012, it says on the back here. But, if you've seen this documentary, you've seen this one that was on the Monday Night Wars tonight. Basically, nothing on there is new other than the talking heads from, like, Chris Jericho, Wade Barrett, like people that are like involved in this show is basically just talking about being a wrestling fan as they were growing up. Daniel Bryan is another name, just Cody Rhodes, guys that were growing up, watching this on television and reliving, telling you what it was like, going to school and talking about being a fan of wrestling, or having your friends, or just sitting around watching on television. Things like that. But basically, even when you get into other things on this show, basically when they talk about This Is Your Life with the Rock and Mankind, this entire segment was copied and pasted from episode 2 of the Monday Night War series with this Mankind. They just picked it up and put it right down over here. It was the same exact stuff, basically hook, line, and sinker, beginning to end. From Vince Russo, Mankind, Rock, the whole segment was the same. Almost much like, the first segment is always the same. I always sort of excuse that because that's sort of like, what hooks you in to watching the show. Much like, if you're watching Friends, it's the I'll be there for you thing. But once this thing finally got, underway, they talk about The Rock, basically as Dwayne Johnson. They're figuring out that he wanted to be a pro wrestler. They don't talk about his history in pro football, but they talk about his family, from, all of the Samoan lineage, which is involved, in the history of the WWE, from the Wild Samoans, from his grandfather, the great Chief Maivia, his father, Rocky Johnson. And because of that, once he says he wants to become a wrestler, his dad sort of, says he doesn't want him to do it, but he goes and Adam says he's going to do it anyways. He reaches out to Pat Patterson, and Pat Patterson gives him a tryout, which basically Pat Patterson tells Vince McMahon, you don't want to sign this guy tomorrow, you want to sign him yesterday. Basically saying that this is going to be a can't-miss guy that needs to be signed as soon as possible. Once he's signed, basically he gets sent. This is from my memory, not from anything else. But basically, once he's finally signed, they send him to Memphis for a hot minute to try and get a little bit better. And they're going to give him the big debut at Survivor Series, where he's going to come in at Madison Square Garden to a big debut. So they're hyping him up, and they're letting everybody know about him. And they talk about how big of a failure Rocky Maivia was from 1996. Basically, at that time, WCW was running running with the NWO, and everybody's a big fan of the anti-hero, and Rocky Maivia comes in with a big smile and an "aw shucks, I'll get him next time" attitude. They basically are hot-shotting him all the way to, being a main eventer before he's even stepping into the ring. Basically, you got Jim Ross, the second he comes out, saying that's Blue Chipper. That's the future right there, is what he says about him. And when we look at this now, and we watch, it's awesome that he says this. But every time I see this in a documentary or a clip or anything like that, I always wonder about how many other guys Jim Ross was saying this about at the same time when they had their debut. When Duke the Dumpster Droese was walking out, was JR like, that's the man right there. I know that Jim Ross was, head of talent relations and things, but, I wonder how many guys that he had, that backing behind. Once Rocky Johnson, or Rocky Maivia, really didn't pan out, basically, Rock went away for a little bit, and when he did come back, he joined the Nation of Domination. From there, basically, he started to get the mic in his hand, and he was able to show off his heel persona, and basically show off who The Rock was. He didn't have to really do the aw shucks smile and things. And he basically rose and became too big for the Nation of Domination. From there, he would go on and take the Nation of Domination basically away from Farouk. And he would make the stable based around his Intercontinental Championship run, where he would have battles against, Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they kept talking about Survivor Series, SummerSlam 1998 is what I believe, the ladder match, and basically the big rivalry of Rock going up against Triple H. And I honestly, as a Triple H fan and as a Rock fan, that's a good match. It's a great match with a really shitty ending. And I don't really like to think of that as one of the big Rock moments. I know from there, he would go on and he would, go up to the main event, and Triple H, it would take him another year to reach that spot. I hate the way that it comes down to basically Triple H giving, China giving the nut shot to Rock as he's climbing up the ladder, and Mark Henry is involved in there. It just should have been them two, and that should have been it, and you look back on that so much other. Rock went on to have, the biggest rivalries of his life, going up against Stone Cold Steve Austin with a big match at WrestleMania 15, WrestleMania 17. They didn't talk about WrestleMania 19 at all. But, as a fan, when I was growing up, and I was watching the product at the time, I really wasn't that excited for WrestleMania 15. WrestleMania 14 was one of my first shows that I really had to work the hardest in order to watch this. Long story short, I didn't have a cable box, and so I ended up basically just going to a random person's house that I worked with and watching WrestleMania 14. That's how big that show was, with Stone Cold Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels. Mike Tyson was involved at the time. But, WrestleMania 15 came along, and I think wrestling was getting bigger, it was getting more popular, but I just looked at, Stone Cold Steve Austin against The Rock as basically The Rock was just another stepping stone for Stone Cold Steve Austin. I didn't really look at The Rock as a big-time challenger. I didn't really see what was coming for him. Once you get to WrestleMania 17, of course, you're going to think of one of the biggest WrestleManias of all time, selling out the Astrodome with thousands and thousands of people inside of there. Someday, I've been asking Jim to make this video for a long time. Everybody knows about the wrestling that went down in there. I just want Jim to talk about, what the feeling of that town was, what it was like inside of the building. What were people saying as the show was going on? I want the insider's perspective. I know I've listened to 1,000 reviews, and I've watched the show myself to know, all about, what was going down inside the ring. I want to know what people were going through. The stories like from WrestleMania 30, with people saying that they couldn't get through the tunnels, and it was one of the worst arenas to get in and get into your seat, and it just was a lot of people had horrible stories, and I want to know what it was like in the Astrodome, and he's the only person I know that was there from at the time. They talk about, Rock and Mankind as basically as rivals, leading up to WrestleMania 15. The battles with Rock and Mankind going back and forth with Stone Cold Steve Austin helping Mankind, and DX was there also, helping Mankind win his first championship, and then they having the halftime heat, which led to that horrible ladder match. Then all going through all of his matches, plus the Royal Rumble was thrown in there with the 15, 16 chair shots to the head. And then just later, just randomly out of the middle of nowhere, the Rock and Sock connection takes off. These guys, the most weirdest pairing that you could ever have in the history of wrestling. Putting these guys together and seeing how long it would last. Who would know that these guys would get all the way to WrestleMania 20 and have a tag match against Evolution. I was thinking more than likely that these guys were just put up to pair up for more than likely just 2 or 3 weeks just to see what would happen. Almost like with Beer Money and TNA. They put these guys together because they didn't have any sort of main angles for them. So let's put them on a tag team so at least we can keep them on television. And 5 years later, these guys are still teaming and they're the best team in TNA. And then they go on to explode and main event Bound for Glory. And Lockdown, and you just have your real big rivalry that everybody always thinks about when you think about TNA. You can't talk about The Rock without basically talking about him leaving, and that's basically one of the most sort of controversial things to talk about The Rock. The Rock sort of says that the main goal for him was to, he had done everything in wrestling, so basically he, took off and tried to conquer another venture, and that was moving into movies. Of course, was starting out with The Scorpion King and The Rundown with Sean William Scott, which led to I can't think of where the movies go from there. I used to be able to name them off one by one, but now it seems like The Rock's probably been in at least 20 movies, close to somewhere around there. So it's hard to remember them all in order of what was going down. I honestly just wanted The Rock to be a wrestler. And the fact that the longer The Rock stayed away, the more it seemed like The Rock was never coming back and never really thought about us. I always think about it back to a Rolling Stone interview with The Rock, and basically talk about, why are you calling yourself Dwayne Johnson? Why have you got away from calling yourself The Rock? And he just basically slammed wrestling fans. Basically said that was the past, and he doesn't do that anymore. And it was just, to me, I always thought of that as someone who just forgot where he came from. And, he came back in 2011, I believe is when it was. It was somewhere in January. And then he went on to be the guest host, and he'd always said that he's home and he's never leaving us again. And that was, his closing words on his, I think it was the closing words on his documentary, and it was also the closing words on the Monday Night War. I saw you wrestle at WrestleMania 29. You wrestled against John Cena. You lost the championship. I called it. I think that's your last match that you're ever going to do. And you rolled out of the ring and you said goodbye to your family. You got back in the ring, and John Cena, the man of the hour who just won the WWE Championship, is just waiting at the top of the ramp for you. We didn't see you again until WrestleMania 30 when you showed up at the Hall of Fame, and you did show up at WrestleMania 30 itself, coming down and giving a promo with Stone Cold Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan. You did come back in surprises just last month, doing the promo with Rusev. But, to me, I know you're not going to show up once a month. I know you're not going to show up every week, but I want to say 4, but maybe even 3 appearances a year like that, where either if they are, spontaneous, or if they are, scheduled out as big deals. I mean, I don't think that's too much to ask from The Rock. I know he's a busy man. He makes big movies, but movies don't take forever. This guy has more downtime than he has work time. And that's just me. I'll never know. But to me, honestly, the Monday Night War, the thing that I watched tonight on The Rock was pretty damn boring. It was all stuff that I'd seen before. All of the interviews were basically stripped right off the DVD that came out a little bit ago. So, honestly, in my opinion, a lot of these have been great. But this was a miss. You guys don't see this? No big deal.